What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we're here to talk about Insane Clown Posse, also known as ICP. For any of you who may not be familiar, they're a rap duo from Detroit. We're best known for being basically like evil clown rappers, I guess you would say, with the black and white face paint, spraying their audience with Faygo, their annual event called the Gathering of Juggalos, and becoming a bit of a meme.
Fucking magnets, how do they work?
And it's not just the band themselves. Their fan base, who call themselves Juggalos, is one of the biggest punching bags in music. Pretty much everybody looks down on Juggalos, calls them white trash. Vice made a documentary kind of gawking at them, almost like they're zoo animals or something. The FBI called them a gang. Juggalos basically get no respect, and some people would say for good reason. But is it really as simple as ICP sucks, they're just dumb clown rap, and their fans are stupid white trash? I don't think it is. Because if you look at what they've actually accomplished, they have multiple gold and platinum albums, they've finessed several major labels for millions of dollars, made a movie, and started their own successful record label called Psychopathic Records, among many other things. But more importantly than any of that, they've also created a community that's a place to belong for people who honestly don't really belong anywhere else. They've put out a message that's surprisingly kind, positive, and uplifting. And honestly, as crazy as it sounds, they've probably saved a lot of lives. So how do they do it? And why don't the critics give them the respect that they deserve? And what is the secret genius of Insane Clown Posse? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please check me out on Twitch. I'm streaming twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. But first, I want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. During hard times, it can get really difficult if you don't have anyone to talk to. Being alone with your thoughts can be an isolating feeling that allows negativity to really overtake you. And that is why we are sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp has customized online therapy that offers video, phone, or even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. My therapist is named Mark, and one of the things that he has helped me understand is that a lot of my anxiety comes from catastrophizing, meaning that I kind of always jump to the worst case scenario, even when that's not really very likely to happen. You just fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you get matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Then you schedule secure video and phone sessions, plus you can exchange unlimited messages, and everything you share is completely confidential. And you can request a new therapist at any time at no additional charge. Join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. And you can get 10% off your first month if you go to betterhelp.com/thepunkrock. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/thepunkrock, or go to the link in the description of this video. Insane Clown Posse's origins start back in 1989 in a rap group called the JJ Boys, which was Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope along with Shaggy 2 Dope's brother. They changed their name to ICP a few years later, originally meaning Inner City Posse, which was also the name of a small-time gang that they had started. They put out a single called Party at the Top of the Hill, but their first real release was called Dog Beats, which was kind of like the Detroit version of NWA.
ICP out of Southwest Detroit, running with a gang of 20 street hoods. Lookers on my back, cause I'm selling them cheap goods, running through the motherfucking alleyway. They can't catch violent, crazy ass psychopath J.
And they did have some success locally, but it wasn't really what they were hoping for. And so they realized that to take things to the next level, they needed to reinvent themselves. As Violent J put it, maybe the reason nobody's buying Dog Beats is because we're just doing some of that same old gangster rap like everyone else. Man, we ain't from fucking LA. Why don't we just get brave and add to this crazy Detroit sound? And what exactly was the quote-unquote Detroit sound? Well, Detroit wasn't exactly a hotbed of rap back in 1990, but they did have two people locally to look at for inspiration. The first was an artist named Esham, who was basically the creator of the style of rap that would become known as horrorcore, and also Kid Rock. Not so much because they liked his music, but more because they respected that he was doing something that was original and unique and different. And so what they realized is that they needed something that was iconic, that they could really own in the same way as Esham and Kid Rock created and owned their characters.
And these were like really defined characters. So when we came up, we were like, Man, Inner City Posse, we're just doing the gang thing. That's not very defined. You know what I mean? We're already the freak show.
LA's doing that shit.
And so after brainstorming various ideas like Ice Cold Pimps and Inner City Psychos, they decided to become Insane Clown Posse after a recurring dream that Violent J had about a clown that would talk to him, and that was that. As he described it, they said, "Let's all paint our faces like clowns and be the Insane Clown Posse. Clowns who murder and kill people who deserve to be murdered or killed." And as simple and kind of goofy as that may sound, this is where it starts to get really interesting to me, because the evil clown imagery is way, way more than just that. Violent J claims that he has a dream where he was approached by this kind of dark clown character wearing a jester hat, who took him to see a place called the Dark Carnival, which is sort of this grotesque, surreal carnival in the sky with these giant roller coasters that was like amazing and terrifying at the same time, and where that dark clown showed him a deck of cards. And this dream and that deck of cards became the basis of their whole career. Each of the 6 cards in that Joker's deck would be a concept album. As he says, each clown face would be a prophet of the newly arrived and named Dark Carnival. Each, in effect, would be holding up a mirror to people to show them something wicked about themselves so they could change. After all 6 prophets showed up, then it would be time for the Dark Carnival to surface on the mortal earth like the apocalypse. Now, if you're starting to realize that all this goes way deeper than you realized, you're right. A lot of people may think of ICP as these Midwest rappers in clown makeup who spray Faygo on their fans, but it is way, way, way deeper than that. It sounds kind of crazy to say, but the band's whole purpose is to help their fans live righteous lives, to prepare for the final judgment of God. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm not. Here's what Violent J himself says. "I believe in God, and I feel that the vision I had was His will. It is because of this belief that I feel that through our music, we can reach out to people who are in need of help, people whose souls are being corrupted beyond return from the evils of this world. I believe that our music, with its apparently violent and extreme outwardly appearance, has the power to attract and draw in people who are lost from God. Then they can hear its deeper, truer purpose, that you should strive to enter Shangri-La, heaven, and not become lost in hell's pit." And the thing to really understand here is that this is not just something he said once that sort of loosely ties this stuff together, but doesn't really make its way into the lyrics. Like, this is very literally tied into the subject matter of almost all their songs. As a couple examples to show you what I mean, take their song Riddle Box, which is basically like a cautionary tale telling their audience that after they die, they'll go to the afterlife and be judged by this thing called the Riddle Box. And if it determines that you lived a wicked life, you're going to go to hell. Or even more blatantly, the Killing Fields, which sort of expands on the same idea, with the bridge being a sample that just says over and over, "You could go to hell." They also have a lot of songs like Hall of Illusions, which is about domestic abusers that hurt their wives or children. They take abusers and walk them through this hall of mirrors that show them what their lives could have been if they had chosen to be better people, and then kill them for their sins.
Back to reality and what you're about. Your wife can't smile 'cause you knocked her teeth out.
This idea of taking revenge on abusers is something that comes up quite a bit in their lyrics. I think this is probably a really personal issue for them because, as Violent J talks about in his book, him and his brother and sister were abused by their stepfather for many years. They've also talked about social issues a lot. For example, their song Chicken Huntin', which is about hunting down and killing racist rednecks. They also have songs that talk about like income inequality. It's really anything from the sort of dumb, shallow music that a lot of the critics think it is. And what I find really interesting is that although their lyrics are obviously very violent and shocking and like deliberately obnoxious and vulgar, they actually seem like really nice guys. In fact, almost like gentle or sweet. For example, their first several lyrics, if you look at the liner notes, all say dedicated to the butterfly. And for years, people speculated about what that meant. And it turns out that it's a reference to something from Violent J's childhood. Him and his brother were out playing in the yard when they were kids. They saw this butterfly that they thought was really beautiful. And so they caught it in a jar. They just kind of wanted to keep it overnight to hang out with it for a little bit and then intended to set it free the next day. But when they woke up in the morning, the butterfly had died. And they felt terrible because they realized that they had essentially kidnapped and inadvertently killed this beautiful creature just based out of pure selfishness. And so together they made a pact to live good, righteous lives so they could go to heaven, meet the butterfly again, and apologize to it. Or their song, Crossing Thy Bridge, where the lyrics are, I've seen some children crossing the bridge. What kind of life did they get to live? What kind of choice did they get to make? What if it was a child's mistake? Fucking take me instead, take me instead. So as much as a lot of people think of them as like stupid clown rap for dumb white trash, that honestly couldn't be more wrong. The entire purpose of the band is to help their fans lead righteous lives, be good people, and ultimately go to heaven. And to be totally blunt, I think their music is horrible. I've tried to get into it many times. I just can't. I just don't think it's good. But the more I look into their message and who they are and what they have to say, the more I develop like a really very deep, sincere respect for them and their message. Like, honestly, I don't really know what other word to use to describe it other than to say it's kind of beautiful. And although this might be news to some of the people watching this who aren't ICP fans, a lot of juggalos saw this coming. They'd kind of hinted at this greater purpose over the years with a lot of the various symbols and lore behind the music, like the butterfly thing, but they really just clearly, blatantly laid it out in their 2002 song, Thy Unveiling, which was very highly anticipated as the final card in the Joker's deck. This is where they promised to finally explain what their mission was. And they just straight up said, we did all of this to save you from hell.
Truth is we follow God. We've always been behind him. The carnival is God in May. Oh, juggalos find us.
Now, one thing a lot of people have gotten wrong over the years, including me, is that they're not really a Christian band per se. They are believers in a higher power, but they've clarified over the years that they aren't really advocates for any specific religion, and maybe in hindsight, they would have phrased that a little bit differently.
Man, I've never been to church in my life. You know what I'm saying?
It comes from the basic principle of right and wrong, you know, evil and good. That's all. We're just trying to say that there's bad guys out there and there are good guys out there. And then, you know, when you're talking to juggalos, what do we want to see out of juggalos? We want to see them, you know, go to heaven. I don't know exactly how that breaks down, you know, religious-wise.
And there are people out there who think that this is all some sort of cynical marketing ploy where they're just taking advantage of their audience's need to belong in order to make more money. But personally, after watching tons of interviews with these guys over the years and researching this video, I think they mean it. I think they sincerely want to help people. But whether you believe it's sincere or not, at the very least, what they've done is build up an incredibly large base of, I guess you would say, lore that makes ICP much more than just a band. And being a juggalo is way more than just being a fan of ICP. They'll tell you that it's a family, which I think is true, but it's even more than that. It's almost like being a member in a parallel universe in the same way that there's like an MCU or whatever. ICP kind of has their own. And that's pretty compelling to the type of people who like ICP. At the very least, all this kind of imagery and lore and stuff gives them an escape from their lives, which, to put it bluntly, are probably kind of shitty. And at best, it gives them the hope and inspiration to be a better person.
We don't have that type of education as far as what's in the Bible or anything like that. We just, you know, at the end of the day, we want to see good people hopefully go to heaven, which we refer to as Shangri-La.
Shangri-La, right.
They've also been involved in quite a bit of charity work and philanthropy that kind of gets lost in all the media stories about juggalos allegedly being a gang and just all the crazy imagery that you see at the Gathering. But they've been doing it for years. And speaking of which, starting out back in 2000, they've held an annual event called the Gathering of the Juggalos, which is their own multi-day festival that brings together tens of thousands of juggalos from all over the world. You've probably seen some of the articles about the Gathering over the years, highlighting like the drugs and alcohol and partying and the nudity and just like general craziness that goes on, which is definitely part of the Gathering. But just like with their music, I think it's really short-sighted to focus on just the kind of more sensational elements of it. Because when you put that together with their lyrics and the message that I talked about, it paints a pretty compelling picture of what people say, which is that the Juggalos really are like a family. Definitely a fucked up, crazy family with a lot of wild shit that happens in it, for sure. But for a lot of people, even that crazy, dysfunctional family might be a lot better than the one that they were born into. Which is what their song Homies is about.
If you wasn't blood, would you still have love? Or in fact, does the blood make you think you have to love?
Basically what they're saying is, if your birth family isn't there for you, then you know what? Fuck them. Your friends in the Juggalo community will be here for you, and that's what matters. And this one really resonated with me because as somebody who grew up in a fairly dysfunctional family myself, the hardcore scene was my support network in the same way that the Juggalo scene is for a lot of those people. And honestly, as dramatic as it sounds, I have to think that that has saved lives. Because sometimes the difference between life and death, when you're dealing with a really serious crisis of mental health or addiction or homelessness or anything else like that, is just having some kind of a support network. And if you read forums and news articles and stuff, there are countless examples of Juggalos coming together to help each other in ways that their families never did. Which I think is what I really respect and admire so much about ICP. They've built a community where a lot of people who really truly don't feel like they belong anywhere else can be themselves and for once feel like they belong. Because let's be real, Juggalos are truly, truly outcasts. They're mostly white people from kind of lower income, working class backgrounds, especially in places like Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. And if we're being honest, that's kind of the one group of people where it's still socially acceptable to just completely shit on them. Which brings me to what I think is a very important part of this whole discussion. A lot of the criticism of ICP and Juggalos in general has a classist component to it that I find pretty gross. Like you think about these people in like LA or New York who went to expensive liberal arts colleges, writing for some blog like Vice or Brooklyn Vegan, making these smug jokes about Juggalos being quote unquote white trash. That just leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. It's mean, it's unkind, and it's always just kind of made me want to see Juggalos win, just to spite those snooty hipsters. And it's not just the fans, it's even true for ICP themselves. It was kind of the same story, like even after they had gone platinum, the music industry basically wanted nothing to do with them.
Hip-hop didn't want to claim ICP, you know what I mean? They didn't understand what we were doing.
That's why we're so grateful today.
You know, and they just was sort of like, they don't count. You know, if you were mentioning all the great rappers from Detroit, ICP be the last name to be on that list. You know what I mean?
On a list.
So to me, if I kind of step back, it's kind of like, what's not to respect about ICP? Even if you don't like their music, I think their message is incredibly powerful, especially by wrapping it in this like violent, shocking imagery. They've gotten millions of people to get into a message that is fundamentally about self-improvement, who otherwise would have written that same message off as corny. And in addition to their message, ICP also deserve a lot of credit for being incredibly smart about their business. And I could do a whole other video just about that aspect of the band, but for now, just kind of give you an idea of how they operate. From the very beginning of the band back in the early 90s, they worked their asses off for years and years and years to promote themselves, using a lot of the same tactics that you would hear from early hardcore bands like Black Flag, like when you hear Henry Rollins talk about how they did things in his book Get in the Van. It's the same stuff as ICP did. They approached this not just as a job, but as their entire life. They would take shifts going out on these promo missions to nearby cities in the Midwest, handing out sampler tapes on the street to anybody who would take one, hustling independent record stores to carry their music, anything from like chain retailers to like literally some corner store with a rack of tapes in the back, like just anybody they could get to spread their music. And being just absolutely relentless about putting up their flyers anywhere within like 150 miles of Detroit. And if you read Violent J's book, which I would suggest you do because it's honestly really good, he has like 100 pages talking about everything they did, which I found just incredibly inspiring. This part really just sums up everything about them and their work ethic. We came bursting through the gates of the local band scene, and strictly through hard ass work, we surpassed all of them lazy fucks within just days. It was like finally busting a nut after 20 years of jacking off. Because after several years of relentless grinding and self-released albums, it finally paid off. After selling over 65,000 copies of their second album Ringmaster and over 150,000 albums in total, all independently, they finally signed with Jive Records to put out their third album Riddle Box, and along with that, they got an $80,000 advance. And where other bands might have taken that as an opportunity to like sit back and congratulate themselves and maybe spend the money on cars or strippers or whatever, they invested it right back into the band. They bought 3 vans to expand the range of their promotional machine and immediately started promoting ICP and other places where they were essentially unknown, such as Madison, Wisconsin and Dallas, Texas. And they eventually realized that they had been doing more to promote the album than Jive was, and they wanted to get out of their contract, but they couldn't because they still owed Jive more albums. And again, a lot of other artists in this situation probably would have just whined and complained, but ultimately done nothing. But ICP did what they always do, they hustled. They got Hollywood Records, which was owned by Disney, to buy out their contract from Jive. So now they were free of that Jive contract, and they got Disney, of all companies, to give them a $1 million advance. But that Hollywood Disney deal didn't work out either. Despite the label telling them many times that they were okay with the band's imagery and lyrics, Hollywood Records forced them to change many of the lyrics on the Great Milenko. And even worse, they pulled the album from store shelves the day that it was released. And again, ICP hustled. They got another label to buy out their contract with Hollywood Records and got another advance to release the exact same album they had just put out on Hollywood.
You know, we had just got the advance from Hollywood. And then we turn around and sign for the same album.
All we had
There's
to do.
no bullshit. We signed the same album and got $1.2 million for that record. Same record. You know
All
what
we
I'm
had to
saying?
do was sign a no-clause contract saying we wouldn't talk about it.
Okay, what you're doing right now.
All we did was talk about it.
And all along, they were building their own label, Psychopathic Records. So when they finally got out of their last contract, they didn't need a label anymore. They had built their own. And so they went independent, and they've stayed that way ever since. And this isn't even touching on any of the other things that they've done in their career, such as their movie, their wrestling show, Juggalo Championship Wrestling, all the other artists that they've helped develop on Psychopathic Records, their massive merch business, among many other things. And so to me, what it comes down to is this. You can say whatever you want about their music. Like I said, personally, I don't think it's great. But once you understand more about who they are and what they've accomplished, I think you really have to respect them. For one, these guys are like certified hustlers and entrepreneurial geniuses who have really built their own little label, largely without the support of the music industry, and doing it in a time and place where that was really not seen as possible. I mean, these are like 9th grade dropouts from Detroit. Not exactly the kind of people who you would think of as the kind of entrepreneurial sharks that they actually are. And you have to wonder how many people in their audience have been inspired and said, hey, well shit, if Violent J and Shaggy 2-Dope did it, then why can't I? And so to me, even more importantly than any of their business success, what they've done is bring a positive, uplifting, empowering message to millions of people who, frankly, the mainstream media and establishment doesn't give a shit about. And although they were mostly seen as kind of the butt of a joke for the last 30 years, I do think they're finally starting to get the respect that honestly they've already deserved. And so for me, I find their story incredibly inspiring, and if I ever have a tiny fraction of the impact that they've had on the world, I'll be happy. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments, and I would like to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts a week early, I do giveaways and other cool stuff, and there's also a way to have me review your music or artwork if that's something you're interested in. Every month I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something live on Twitch, all you need to do is drop it in the comments of that post. Then I will review it live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. And so if that sounds interesting to you, check it out at the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, check it out at the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but